John Sumbrick here with Kinetic Data. I've been with the company from the beginning. And I did a little LinkedIn research lately and found myself, and I thought that was kind of a fun way to look back at history. And I like to say that I'm a product visionary. I'm a bit of a dreamer. And if you've ever talked to me about any of our products, I really have maybe 3 versions of each of our products going on in my head at one time. So I ask a lot of questions. Which version are you on? Which direction do you want to go, et cetera. And I'm always sort of experimenting with the future of our products, and that's what I'm running in my head, and hopefully listening to you guys and being able to better guide where those products go. If you look back at my LinkedIn, I really kind of have 3 major companies that I've worked with. Certainly Kinetic Data, and I looked at this just the other day. It's 21 years. Certainly have learned a lot. It feels like really a new chapter. 21 years is kind of a golden number. We've got a lot of great things going on with Kinetic, and I think that we have a whole new chapter coming along here. So we're going to be sharing that with you guys. 3M, I worked at before Kinetic Data, and I learned a lot of different things there. And fundamentally, what I learned was the value of teams. I worked with a whole bunch of different development groups at 3M, and I saw some of them succeed and some of them have challenges. And what I really learned was a quality team that can get together, get along, can solve pretty much any problem, technology withstanding or notwithstanding. They can get over any of these hurdles. And that whole team quality was what I really kind of came out of with 3M. And then prior to that, I worked at a company called Wilson Learning, which was a Myers-Briggs company. And if you look, that's like 25 years ago. But what's kind of funny to me is the first thing that they had me do was to write a help desk application on Paradox. And so I'm still in that kind of help desk world. And what I learned back then is to just kind of get rid of all the fluff and just do the very basics. And the help desk system took off within the company. So I've been in this help desk world for quite a while, and it's been a lot of fun. So Kinetic Data, 21 years. I've been involved in all of our products from idea to prototype, version 1, version 2, et cetera. And it all started off with Kinetic Survey. That was our first product. And I was telling this story last night at dinner to somebody, and it was a really kind of a fun time. It was our first product, never had a product before. How do you market it, et cetera. And this was when Google AdWords started to come out, and you could build your own Google ad. And so I remember Saturday night, I put together a Google ad, and Monday morning, I got a call from Intel. That was our very first call. It was like 2 days after. And that was kind of a lot of fun. It really opened my eyes to how companies take these things on. They certainly take them very serious. And did a whole bunch of demos, and it took maybe 9 months to buy. And one of the demos, and this is a good learning lesson, I did a demo to share, let Intel invite all the people they wanted, and we did a 1-800 number. And the phone bill was $3,000 to me for that one demo. So I kind of figured get rid of the 1-800, because if they can't afford the phone call, they probably can't afford the software. And that was kind of a good lesson. But as you can see, we've got a variety of products there. We started off with products, and then eventually we've gotten to this KinOps thing, and that's kind of the latest, and I'll talk about that. In addition to having a bunch of products come out in the last 20 years or so, I've got some family members too. So this is my 4 kids, which I call a third of a dozen. It seems like a better description. The oldest one is going off to college this year, and that's another big chapter in my life. So I've got some great family things happening in addition to some company things. So like Matt, welcome to KEG. I was going to show this picture. We've been holding KEG in Minnesota the last few times, and it's really, we're quite proud of Minnesota. We've held it in Minneapolis the last few times, and now we're in St. Paul, and our office is just a mile away from here. And we just really kind of think St. Paul and Minnesota is a real healthy place. A lot of groups are trying to get big in the tech world and build up Minnesota as being a real tech hub. And we have a lot of great skills in Minnesota, and it's just kind of nice to highlight Minnesota is a good place where technology is happening, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later today. We brought out our great weather for you, as you know, but this was 2 weeks ago, like Matt showed earlier. This is my daughter and the backyard, and it was a shocker, all the snow. I think we'll probably all mention that in our presentations, but it really made an impact on all of us. We're like, oh, this better be gone by the time KEG's here. So I'm going to give a brief history of kinetic data. Then I'm going to talk about what is the market doing. And we're listening a lot to what other companies are doing, what customers are looking for, what trends are happening, and trying to incorporate that into our world. So like Matt said, you can build on top of and not necessarily reinvent the world over and over. So we're really paying attention to what's happening in the market, and I'm going to talk about that and talk about what we think of the market and how this impacts our world. And then we're going to talk about what we're actually doing with these things and what you guys can leverage. And then we're going to go on to what we call conversations with the architects. And the presentations are going to be good. We're happy about that. But I think these discussions are really where the value is in KEG, is to interact with other customers, interact with our consultants, and kind of have this impromptu discussion that's relevant for you. So discussions is really kind of where the greatest value is. So I'm going to go into a brief history. We started off with consulting, helping large companies, typically with internal processes, all kinds of different processes that were IT related, but then also not related to IT, but more sales of contracts, warranty repairs, all kinds of business activity. And we just did project after project after project. And what we needed to do was pretty much standard across these projects, is gather some sort of data, route that data through some sort of process, maybe produce a report or two that made sense, and to really, quite frankly, get it done quickly. And then once it was done, it was like a month or so later, let's change it like this, let's change it like that. It was just this constant change that was really the project. The first project was to stand it up. The long term of changing is where all the real work was. And fundamentally what was going on was they were asking IT to build something and then they'd wait. Ask IT to do something again and then they'd wait. And it was wait to get these things done. And so the fundamental problem, in my opinion, was they needed a developer to do these tasks. So the tasks were all the same, it's just that they had to wait for a developer. The business had the idea, and then get in line and wait for it to get done. And it wouldn't be prioritized the way the business needed, et cetera. And they just needed a developer to get things done. So really the solution was this low-code concept. But this is 10, 15 years ago, and the low-code concept really hadn't existed, or the name hadn't become familiar yet. But that's what was really needed. So Kinetic Data built a bunch of low-code style products before that name really became popular. The Kinetic Survey product allowed somebody who was more of a business person, or what is now called a citizen developer, to create their own surveys, create their own workflows, tie it into their business process, and not necessarily wait for IT to jump in and save the day. Same thing with the Request product. Same idea was that we can make an average person able to create forms and processes in that world. And that's what we ended up building. So more recently, however, what we've come up with, and these are the big projects of late, the Kinetic Request product, we re-architected the whole thing based on our experiences with the customers. So we've been 10 years of the previous architecture, and we learned what was efficient, what was difficult, and it was really this ability to change rapidly was the golden nugget. And so we re-architected so that you could do that kind of thing. And then the other thing that we came up with is this world of KinOps, which is a hosted version of our software. And as everyone knows, the SaaS world has been very well received. And so those are the kind of the projects of late. So the core edition, what had happened was we had built the Kinetic Request, and now we're calling it Remedy Edition. And what had happened is big companies went gangbusters with the software. They took it way further, way faster than what we had really, I'll call it, prepared for. And that was a great thing. And so we've taken those learnings or those difficulties and re-architected for that so that they can continue to go wide and deep with our product. But also, by kind of lowering these barriers so that a small and mid-sized company who wouldn't necessarily have the luxury of dedicating a bunch of developers or resources to the system can actually be successful too. So that was kind of the big drivers. And the whole concept of low code has been accepted, and so this is really kind of where we targeted the application. And again, we're targeting large companies with web scale type usage. Flexibility was the real driver, and user experience is the thing that people are talking about. So those are the kind of the core features of the Request Next edition. KinOps, however, is really something that our customers had been doing for their customers. So we have some very large service provider type companies who have purchased the Kinetic application suite, and they have bundled our applications together and put them in a hosted environment and then targeted towards those customers. So they might reuse our software for a couple hundred hospitals, or they'll another service provider is targeting towards mid-sized government, and we have these other service providers that are targeting solutions for certain types of companies and effectively hosting our solutions. So it's being done and has been done for a while. We thought it would be a good idea to put together a hosted version of our software that's generic in nature. Any company can come in, take advantage of what we're providing, and get their solution up and running quickly with our framework. And so our target for the KinOps world is a generic usage. And what's nice about it for our existing customers is this KinOps world is a very large scale world. So we're running into these scaling questions before our customers are, and we can put solutions in before anybody runs into issues, et cetera. So we're really breaking the ground in this large scale and management of these systems. So that's a bit of our history. So what is the market doing? Well, I'd like to say the market has awakened. We've been seeing this trend or need for low code and really sort of enabling citizen developer type people. We've been seeing this since the beginning. And I'd say the last 5 years or so, the market has really accepted that and has grown. And so we're seeing a lot of new companies coming into the space and trying to provide their solutions. And I think that it's a kind of a golden time for companies right now because there's a lot of choices out there. And the technology is moving very quickly. It is hard to decide what choices to go with, as there are a whole bunch of choices. But you're routinely coming up with new solutions that are challenging the old paradigms, and I think that we're all kind of in a benefit position right now with that. So what's happening is new companies are coming along. You certainly have heard of Uber and those types of companies, and they just seem to pop up overnight. Those existing companies in those spaces are obviously being disrupted, and so they need to respond. So having these systems be agile so that you can respond to new threats is the big thing. And nobody wants to be able to say that their business can't do something because the systems aren't agile enough. So there's this huge movement to make systems agile. So with this, not only are there, we'll say, development strategies that have changed, but things like DevOps, being able to roll out hundreds, if not thousands of machines quickly, efficiently to be able to support your environments and scale up has become commonplace. Systems like Docker allow us to run much more efficient machines on the existing hardware. And then this whole concept of microservices to be able to specialize in certain things and get certain functions like security or logging or whatnot standardized across companies so that you can just move on up the stack to more business style problems and no longer worry about infrastructure. So those are kind of all infrastructure type things. But then low code has become the rage. Citizen developers, this whole phrasing of platform of engagement, which is really front-ending your existing business systems, your existing data, all that sort of development type work on top of quality infrastructure has been the game in the last 5 years. And that's where I think the big space is for us. So in addition, I mentioned, other companies are joining into this low-code space. So BPM-type companies, which I always think of are softwares that do 5 to 10 processes, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times a year. That was kind of their space. They're trying to modify their software to be more of the hundreds, if not thousands of processes, hundreds, if not thousands of times a year. It's a very different development space. BPM tends to be for developers and hardcore developers. Our space is more this citizen developer space. But anyways, they're kind of joining the party. And then ITSM vendors are also taking their processes, which tend to be IT focused, obviously, but they're really trying to bring their experience to the party too. And really what the end result is, everyone has a lot of choices, and we're all learning right now. The other thing that has really become commonplace and quite frankly huge is this API movement. So we've been talking about it for a while, being able to build beautiful front ends for complex back ends. Well, you do that by taking your complex back end and producing APIs for that, and then having a system of engagement that can call those APIs and make it look beautiful. Well, this has become a big deal lately, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but Salesforce just recently built or purchased MuleSoft, which is a leader in this space, for $6.5 billion. I say that only because it's the same space that we've been seeing for a while, and we've made a whole bunch of API-enabling technology in our world, and this is going to be the big thing for the next couple of years. So being able to make your existing complex backends available to all of your front ends will be what people work on. So how did this really happen? How did low-code come across? Well, I think shadow IT is sort of an enabler for this. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, but what was happening was there's a lot of competition in companies, and they were needing to respond in business time, not in IT time. And they had to go out and find their own solutions. And with the world of SaaS, it was a very safe thing to do because they didn't have to go out and manage this stuff. They could just use it. And so shadow IT was really kind of this group that enabled business to get business functions going. And what was difficult is just no longer difficult. It's easy to buy SaaS solutions, there's lots of choices, and they're just worth chasing down to see if they solve your business problem. And the business needs these things in business time, and that's kind of what has taken off. So shadow IT has really been able to take advantage of the fact that running systems which was hard is no longer hard because they don't have to do it. It's kind of this no-ops thing. Somebody else is taking over their pain, and these solutions tend to be very focused in nature. So Slack is a great example for doing just discussions. Trello is nice for doing Kanban. Basecamp is good for doing projects. But once you get into a larger organization, you kind of want those things working together, and that's kind of a challenge. And then building business systems was hard, but this whole world of low code, being able to drag these things like Slack and Trello together and putting them together with if this, then that, is a reasonable thing to do now. That you can produce business systems that at least function relatively to the need. The real question is, are they maintainable long run, and do they have the security issues that a real organization requires? Those are kind of the next set of questions. But as shadow IT is really making all these business functions hum quite easily and no longer having to wait for traditional IT to get them done. So to me, the new challenge, because we have all these choices, is where can we use these things? And with the hundreds, if not thousands, of potential projects within an organization, how do you prioritize? And it's not an easy thing to do. You need to come up with a whole new strategy of dealing with this, and that's what we're going to talk about. So digital transformation is a phrase that's been used quite a bit lately, and I see a lot of the vendors are talking about their software as being digital transformation software. And so I thought I'd look up what that digital transformation really means. And so here it is. Digital transformation is a profound transformation of business and organized activities, processes, blah, blah, blah. For me, I kind of get lost after about 5 words. So I kept on going. So I Googled and found another definition or another description. And this one I thought was entertaining. So what digital transformation really means, according to InfoWorld, digital transformation, aka DX, is hot. If you're not doing it, your company will die. And you'll lose your CIO or IT leadership job, and shudder, you'll be disrupted. Okay, so this is like clickbait to me. I have to read this thing, right? It's got hot, die, lose job, all these buzzwords, right? So I read the article, and quite frankly, it was a fantastic article. And basically, what most organizations think of in terms of digital transformation is this, at least stage one, this paving the cow path, which really means, hey, these are what we're doing manual today, or these are the things that are just not really digitized. Let's digitize them. And that's kind of phase one, and that's entry level to the game. But really, this article, and I believe the real value of digital transformation, is to have a platform that allows you to change. So certainly go ahead, pave the cow path, but have a system so that you can clone that, version it, try a different cow path, try 2 cow paths, try a wider cow path. Being able to change and being able to see if this change made a difference is really, I think, the power of the digital transformation world. Because that's what's going to be needed in the future, is the ability to adapt to different business scenarios, different needs, et cetera, and being able to be agile with your systems is where everyone is going to be chasing, and it's the right thing to do just to keep up with the competition and to maximize your opportunities. So really, digital transformation is a digital platform for change, and I like to say I nailed it in 5 words. All right. So what does Kinetic Data think of this? Well, that agility is really the key thing. These things which are technologies, Docker, microservices, they're a great infrastructure agility. You'll have this basic foundation that no matter what business applications you're on top, it's going to be able to scale up and scale down based on need, and you're going to be able to, I'll call it optimize, which basically means if you don't need a lot of resources, don't use a lot of resources. If you need a lot of resources and it's temporary, scale up. Being able to scale up and scale down based on need is just a foundational thing for the future of computing, and these are the components that allow that. And then certainly low code. I really have been a fan of this for 10, 15 years. Being able to let somebody who's close to a business problem solve their own business problem in their own pace, with their own thinking, is liberating for people. It's a real bummer to have what you think is a relatively easy thing, and then you have to go to somebody else to do it, and they say, plan B, because I've got some other projects, and so you have to kind of wait with your thumbs spinning. Being able to allow somebody to solve their own problem in their own business time is a great thing for humans, and I think that it's a great thing for business too. And so this whole ability of low code to be able to build great things by dragging and dropping and configuring is going to let people enjoy their jobs better, but also to produce the solutions that make sense for them. So I think that is the key thing. And so once you get your business problem up and running, being able to change that process easily is what will be phase 2. And like I mentioned, if anybody has seen these costs of applications, you've got the cost of an application to create it, but it's the long-term running and maintenance where expense is really significant. Well, if we can bring that cost of change down and make it easier to change things and not disrupt things, then you're more likely to change, and being able to see, is this a change that's worth it or not? So being able to change is key, and that's what we've built into our products across the board, and it's key for our designs. So digital transformation, I think it's spot on. Having a framework, being able to change is where it's at. And there's new challenges that show up as soon as you start on this path. And we've been doing it for quite some time, so I think that we're prepared for that. So I was building these slides or PowerPoints, and this is when I kind of said, hey, PowerPoint, let's jazz it up a little bit. So I put some imagery in here and change the fonts and layout and stuff like that, having a little bit of fun. But what I see, or what we see, is there's some stages of this digital transformation. There's the initial stage, which I mentioned, which is the paving of the cow path. The next one is the scale stage, and that's where you've digitized a couple of things and you see, hey, this one is really valuable to our company. In fact, it might even be sort of key to your business in terms of selling contracts or something, and you scale that out. And that's usually kind of phase 2 is to take one of your services and really maximize it. And then the last one I'm just calling this master stage, which is what I kicked off the whole thing with, which is now that you're able to build things and now that you're able to scale them, which ones actually should be built out and which ones should be shelved. And that whole mastery phase is a whole different set of thinkings. And we have experience in all of those, and we have some presentations later today that cover each one of those phases and the different challenges that they have. So that first stage typically is about beautifying something, making it look better. It wasn't a process that you were very proud of originally. You're now coordinating the workflow, providing visibility to people so they can see that something is getting fulfilled. And that's kind of that initial stage. And maybe you're using some APIs and calling into some other systems. And that's that initial stage, and that's the cow path stage. The scale stage is where you probably are hiring some graphic designers to make it look exactly the way you want. So originally you're using some templates and some built-in things. But this next stage is where you're taking pride and you're really putting a process out there that you want your customers to take a look at and really benefit from financially. So you spend some time beautifying it and hiring some people. And I use the word coordinate workflow purposefully. A lot of people talk about automation, and I think automation's awesome. But I think automation is usually phase 2 or phase 3. It's coordinating the workflow is step number 1. It typically is the case that a lot of people are manually doing things, but manual coordination is a great first step. And then you can start measuring and saying, hey, this particular step is just taking way too long, or it's happening way too often. It's a candidate for some automation. But I think jumping straight into automation is oftentimes premature, and it prevents success and moving forward. So just coordinating as step 1 is a great step. But then once you get into the scale phase, you really need to streamline and provide some automation. And then certainly visibility was key, probably to the participants who might have been requesting a process or a service of some sort. But now you need a different set of visibility and making it much more manageable to handle hundreds, if not thousands, of these requests simultaneously. And then also are possibly not only consuming APIs, but producing some APIs so other systems can participate with your significantly scaled process. And so that's kind of the next phase. And there's a whole bunch of learnings that happen in here. And this is a real fun area because it's typically automating something that's been a real pain point and has real great value in the company. And it's a good, fun time. This next one is where large companies say, hey, we saw benefit in this scaling. Where else can we do this? And there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, let's throw everything into our system. Well, you start looking at the cost of that, and that could be millions of dollars to migrate existing services and processes into a framework like this. And certainly that's a lot of fun, but really you need to take your processes and come up with a prioritization strategy and bring in the ones that make sense first and then eventually probably not even do some. And so there's just a whole different set of thinking that needs to happen in this space. And these are kind of the topics that go in there. And we'll have a presentation on this later today too with one of our customers. So the needs in those different stages are quite different, and we've seen that for a while. So what I really like is this InfoWorld article, and I put a little URL on the bottom. You can easily find it if you just do InfoWorld digital transformation. But it's well phrased. So thinking differently is perhaps the most important ingredient in digital transformation. If you keep thinking the same, you're just going to be used to do more of the same. That's the opposite of transformation. And so what I kind of see is oftentimes people get a new technology and they go, let's take the old strategy, the old process, and put it in the new tool, and poof, everything will be better because it's the new tool. Well, that's not really the case. The new tools are using a whole different set of thinking, a whole different set of goals, and just mapping your old world to the new world, and then poof, we've got a better situation is not really what's going to happen. You do need to think a little bit differently, and these frameworks are designed for long-term change, and your old system most likely was not. So re-architecting, rethinking is how you're going to be able to take advantage of these new worlds. So let's go on to what is Kinetic Data doing. And what we're doing is we've been putting together this platform for quite some time now, and our whole strategy or goal of late has been this movement to get more companies, more people into actually using our system and taking advantage of this. And so we're going to talk a bit about that. And so our driver for that is this system called KinOps. And KinOps is our hosted platform. We targeted the application originally for companies 100 to 1,000 people and set up this environment to be a multi-tenanted environment. We learned a whole bunch of things on this, and I'm just going to kind of highlight some of them. In order to spin these things up, we needed to take advantage of our APIs, and so we built a whole world where we can spin up sample spaces for companies, purely automated. And this ends up being beneficial for our existing customers. We've talked about them. They've got these QA, our dev QA production environments, and being able to migrate things through the environments is a key thing for our existing customers. And so by building this whole automated build world, we've actually indirectly built a system for migrating more simply from dev to QA to production. So that was one of the outcomes there. In addition, we've come up with this framework called Never Drop, Never Fail. And so when people are building out workflows and they're not exactly trained, seasoned people, you have things that break, and that's normal. We've built this entire framework that allows people to build workflows that are not great workflows, that do have issues, and the system will recover and bring those exceptions to you in a way that is easy to recover. And so that's something that, working with some of our large customers who have hundreds of thousands of these things happening on a weekly basis, they're really taking advantage of this Never Drop, Never Fail framework too. Certainly the multi-tenancy is a big deal, and we're exercising our security with this whole platform too. We have military customers and large government organizations, and all of our customers, quite frankly. Security is a pretty big topic on everybody's mind, and this is really exercising our experiences in that space. One of the things that's been nice about the world of KinOps, so our experience has been with large organizations that are hosting their own world. And so we might get a bug or a feature request, and we'll build something that solves that problem, and we'll put it out for our customers to use it. But we might not hear for 6 to 9 months that this really solved their problem because they've got change management, they've got all these kinds of things that don't really allow them to take a patch or a new version and bring it into their environment very quickly. So the world of KinOps is different. Because we're hosting our own environment and because we have the developers close, et cetera, when features and enhancements or bug fixes come out, they actually go into the KinOps world first. And we're able to get this feedback loop so much faster than the previous generations of software that we're able to come up with new ideas, test them, see if they really worked, and then quite frankly, feel good about it in a relatively short time frame. So when a developer works on something and they get some feedback that it actually solved the problem in a tight time frame, they want to tackle the next one. But if it takes 6 to 9 months before you hear that something that you did was of value, that's a bit deflating. So I believe that our whole development group has really kind of elevated their enthusiasm and their desire to get things done in a reasonable time frame. It's just been a much better development cycle as a result. So that was one of the benefits I felt. It was not predictable, but it's been a great outcome. So as we built out this world, what we built was a service portal that companies can use. And so we went into this going, oh, what form should we use, or what form should we include? And it was kind of obvious. And I think if you guys all sat down, you guys could probably come up with 10 forms, 20 forms that every single company could come up with. And that's, we built that out, and that part wasn't so bad. So password reset, request new equipment, report a problem, all those types of things. That part was just fine. And we could do that for every single department. So HR can have processes, facilities could have processes. But then the next question was, well, what processes should exist behind each one of these? And that was like, this is exactly what our customers go through. They have to figure out what their process is. And it's usually a quite time-consuming event. And so when people ask me, how long does it take to stand something up in Kinetic? It's like, well, geez, you can build a form and a process in a couple hours. Oh, a couple hours, great. Well, we'll get our Kinetic world going real quickly. And then you go back and you say, well, what forms? Well, that probably takes a couple weeks. Okay, so we got this process. That takes another week or two. And it turns out that the real time in the world of Kinetic is to sit down with your own company and find out what your own process is. It's not the building of the process and the form. And we ran into that because we're building this system for companies that we don't even know who they are yet, and we're trying to come up with this generic strategy. And we basically figured out it's impossible for us to predict what somebody would want behind these processes. So then what? What kind of processes can take place? What could people possibly do? And fundamentally, there's two types of processes. I'll call it a structured process where something goes step A, step B, step C, or unstructured, step A, we have to figure it out, go to the next person, figure it out, and then maybe it's done. So it's like straightforward, defined, or undefined. And so what we ended up coming up with in the world of KinOps is this framework for creating ad hoc processes. So you can build your form, and then you have to decide, okay, when this form gets submitted, we're going to assign it to this team. And that team is going to figure it out on their own, and the system's going to be watching, and it's going to be basically documenting what that process is. So you can go to form to process right away, and people do figure these things out, and they'll say, oh, well, I have to get this person to approve it, and then once that person approves it, then this will happen, and they'll start doing the process, and the system is watching and documenting it on the fly. So it's this whole new way of taking a new process and just do it in Kinetic, and Kinetic will be building or defining the process behind you. And it just really shortens up the time frame on taking on new processes. So that's something that we built into KinOps, and it's available to all of our customers. So that makes sense. And that makes sense if you know what the next step of the process is. But that's not always the case. So then what? Well, we built in this whole framework called discussions. And the idea is that a request of some sort can come in, and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to invite some people to participate with me, and we'll kind of discuss it, bat it back and forth, and it'll all be sort of documented what the questions were, how we came about this process. And then once, as a team, we know what we do, then we can start off on the ad hoc process. So we put ad hoc process into our framework, and this discussions into the framework. And now we feel that any process can be covered, and this is all just standard stuff. So it'll help companies go from idea to process much faster. The other thing that we have focused quite a bit on is optimizing for fulfillment. So one of the things that when this whole world of Kinetic started up is we wanted to make forms look nice. That was like the big thing. Companies were using Remedy. It didn't look nice. We wanted to put a nice front end on it, and that was the start. But what we ended up finding out is that's great, but there's a key group to make happy, and that's the fulfillers. If you can make the task that somebody needs to do on the back end, if you can make that streamlined, gather the right data, possibly a little bit of automation to get their fulfillment done, they'll be happier, and they will encourage people to use the request front end. So instead of stopping by and asking somebody or emailing or using different ways to get at them, they'll say, hey, use the request system because it comes into them in a very efficient way, and they can just quickly fulfill. So that was something that we've really sort of focused on the last 5 years or so, and being able to create optimized fulfillments and basically forms that are specific to the task at hand. So if you need to set up an email address, the task that's for you has the email address, maybe the maximum email size. All these questions are specific to email. They'll be right there. They fill it out. It gets done for them. That's a key. And so we've been working on that for quite some time, and that's built in to our KinOps framework, and we call it Q, and that's available for everybody to use. So now that we have the hosted system and this system for rapid enhancements, what's next? Well, we're going to talk about that a little later today. And at this point, we're going to jump in and talk with architects about how we're doing some of these things internally.